Hey, second grade, it's Miss Curl. So today we're going to be learning about determining the theme of a passage. So there's a couple things we need to talk about before we jump into our story today and we start working on this. Well, first thing we need to do is talk about what's theme. What does theme mean? So the theme is the lesson that we learn from the story. It's something that we learn from the story. So whenever we're reading different passages and stories, sometimes they're there to teach us a lesson or to teach us something or to tell us something. And that's the theme of the passage. So I have this short little passage for us, and what we're going to do is we're going to figure out the theme. What's the lesson that the story wants us to learn? What do they want us to learn from reading this? So what we're going to do is we're going to read, and then we're going to find 3 clues that help us figure out the theme of the story or the lesson of the story. So let me go ahead and make myself smaller. And here's our little story for today. I told you it's pretty short. So what we're going to do is I want you to follow along as I read out loud. So I'm going to read the story and I want you to follow along. Starting at the top. George loved video games. He bought every video game that came out, and he prided himself on being the first person to try out new games. George's Aunt Rachel sent him $100 for his birthday every year, and this year, about 2 weeks before his birthday, Nintendo released a brand new game. George just had to have it. The game cost $100. He just knew he would have the money in a few weeks, but he wanted the game right now. In order to get the game, George borrowed money from everyone that he knew. $5 here, $10 there, confident that when he received his birthday card from his aunt, that he would be able to repay his debts. Finally, a day after his birthday, a box arrived for George. Inside was a very nice shirt, a birthday gift from his aunt. I thought I would do something different this year, she wrote, inside of a card in which money was conspicuously absent. I hope you like the shirt. So, in our story, let's kind of recap what happened first, and then let's start talking about the theme. So, George was a big video game fan, and his birthday was coming up. And in the past, his aunt always gave him $100 for his birthday. Now, there was this new game that he wanted, and it cost also $100. So he just assumed that he would be getting the money from his aunt in a couple weeks. So he went ahead and borrowed money from everybody so that he could buy the game right now instead of waiting until he actually had the money in hand. But it turned out his aunt did something different this year and sent him a shirt instead of the money. So there is a lesson to be learned here. There is a theme to this story. I want you to take a minute. What do you think what did you learn from George's experience? What are some first things that came to mind? What are some things that you learned through George's experience? So personally, I learned that you got to be careful, right? You can't get too far ahead of yourself and assume things are going to happen until they actually do. George thought that his aunt was going to send money because she'd done it in the past, but she didn't. She changed it up. So until he actually had the money, he shouldn't have went ahead and borrowed money from everyone and just assumed that he'd be able to pay them back, right? He didn't know that. He jumped ahead and got too far ahead of himself, and that was a lesson that he learned. So that's kind of the theme of our story. So we need to find a couple clues that are going to help us figure out and set our theme in writing. So what I want you to do, I want you to grab a piece of paper and something to write with. So if you need to pause me while you grab those 2 things, go ahead and do that. All right, so now that you have your piece of paper and your pencil, I want you to take your paper and I want you to recreate this. So I want you to draw 4 boxes here. 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't have to have the arrows. I just want you to draw 1 box, 2 box, 3 box, 4. And I do want you to make them pretty big because we're going to be writing in them. So go ahead and fill up your paper with these boxes. Go ahead and make your paper look like this. And I want you to write clue, 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 and then write theme on that last box. So go ahead. If you need to pause me while you recreate this, you may do so. All right, so now that you have this ready, what we're going to do is go back in our story. We're going to find 3 clues that help us come to that theme that George got ahead of himself, right? He made an assumption. He guessed something would happen and made a decision based on that, and it didn't end up happening. So let's go ahead and look back through our story and find some clues that will help us with that. George loved video games. He bought every video game that came out, and he prided himself on being the first person to try out new games. George's Aunt Rachel sent him $100 for his birthday every year, and this year, about 2 weeks before his birthday, Nintendo released a brand new game. George just had to have it. The game cost $100. He just knew he would have the money in the few weeks, but he wanted the game right now. So what's something in the beginning that kind of tells us what George is doing, right? So let me go ahead and underline this for now, and then we're going to write it in our thing. So sent him $100 every year for his birthday. And about 2 weeks before his birthday, Nintendo released a brand new game. So he knew he would have the money in a few weeks, so he wanted the game right now. So that's a clue to the lesson or the theme that we're learning. So on the top of our box, we're going to go ahead and write that George knew he was getting the money, right? George knew that he was going to be getting the money. Let me go ahead and move this box over. There we go. George knew he was getting the $100 soon, but wanted the game now. So in that first box, we're going to go ahead and write that George knew he was getting the $100 soon, but wanted the game now. I went ahead and made this bigger so you guys can see it. So in your first box is what you're going to write. George knew he was getting the $100 soon, but wanted the game now. I'll fix this so that we can fit better. George knew he was getting the $100 soon, but he wanted the game now. He knew, or he assumed, right, that his aunt usually sent him the money. So he figured that he wanted the game now. He wasn't going to wait, right? And he knew that he was getting the $100 soon. So go ahead. If you need to pause me and write that in clue 1, go ahead. All right, so let's keep reading. In order to get the game, George borrowed money from everyone that he knew. $5 here, $10 there. Confident that when he received his birthday card from his aunt, that he would repay his debts. So that's the next clue, is that George then borrowed money and guessed he would be able to pay it back, right? He assumed he'd be able to pay it back. So our next clue is that George borrowed money for the game because he thought he could pay everyone back with his birthday money. So George borrowed money for the game because he thought that he could pay it back. He thought that he was going to be able to have enough money to pay it back. All right, so if you need to go ahead and pause me while you fill this one in, you may. George borrowed money for the game because he thought he could pay everyone back with his birthday money. So go ahead and write that in box 2. All right, let's look at for our last clue that's going to help us figure out this theme or point and get our theme down in writing. Finally, a day after his birthday, a box arrived for George. Inside was a very nice shirt, a birthday gift from his aunt. I thought I would do something different this year, she wrote, inside of a card in which money was conspicuously absent. I hope you like the shirt. So that's our third and final clue, is that his aunt sent a shirt because she thought she would do something different this year. So his aunt sent a shirt because she thought she would do something different this year. So now George assumed that he was getting this money, and now he borrowed all this money from people and has no money to pay them back. So that's kind of his issue, right? So go ahead and if you need to, pause me so you can write the third clue down. His aunt sent a shirt because she thought she would do something different this year. Go ahead and pause me and fill in that third box. So if we look at each of our boxes, we have George knew he was getting the $100 soon but wanted the game now. George borrowed money for the game because he thought he could pay everyone back with his birthday money. And then finally, his aunt sent a shirt because she thought she would do something different this year. So what did we learn from George's mistake? We learned that you can't get ahead of yourself. You cannot get ahead of yourself and assume anything. So assume means guess, right? You can't guess that something's going to happen because you don't know. Someone might want to do something different. Just because you always did something doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be that way, right? So go ahead on for our theme. You cannot get ahead of yourself and assume anything. So do not think, oh, I can do this because I know this is going to happen. It may have happened in the past, but that doesn't mean it's going to continue to happen. So go ahead and if you need to, pause me and write down that theme. So we can take George and the lesson that he taught us, or the theme, right? That's the theme or the lesson of the story. So second grade, before you go, great job. You worked really, really hard and I appreciate it. So remember, theme is that lesson that we learn from a story. And we can reread, we've talked about that strategy before, look back and find clues that help us figure out what that theme or what that lesson is from the passage. See you next time, second grade. Great job.